Good.
10 minutes.
Good Chair.
For questions and answers.
Thank you. Minister, I'm becoming increasingly worried that this pursuance of the Leaving Cert almost at all costs is becoming something akin to the Great Dunkirk moment in our response to how we demonstrate our resilience or overcome adversity in the face of this pandemic, that we'll do it regardless and we'll get through it. And with every day and with every week that passes, that window where we can present a viable alternative seems to be closing. And one of the reasons why I'm growing more concerned about this is with every phone call I get from a young person in my constituency talking to me about their anxiety, distress, it seems like it's not going to be possible. The Leaving Cert, in terms of how I understand my experience, in terms of how engaged the role I've had previously working within Deaf Skills, the Leaving Cert has always been something that illuminates the privileges that exist in Irish society. It's always been a way that people, depending on their income, were able to lock in privilege, ensure that their son or daughter were able to get the best places in our universities, and those who experienced disadvantage had less opportunity to do so. In the current environment, that gap of inequality that already existed is becoming a chasm. And we've talked about this in the context of the digital divide, and the digital divide is very important. I'm going to come to that now in a second. But it's not just a digital divide that makes our system and how we judge our young people in terms of are they worthy for university and that. It's not just the digital divide that is important here. There's a multitude of other divides there. I'm dealing with students in inner city Dublin who don't have access to a skill table upon which they can do their homework or do their study on. There is other situations happening now where their parents are working in their frontline services, where they're working in their supermarkets. It's these same young people who are doing their Leaving Cert, supposed to be doing their Leaving Cert this year, who have been asked to step in and provide care work. And that's something that these are facing, and that gap of inequality is going to be exacerbated. And it's going to be exacerbated if we continue on as we are. And I want to touch on it, I want to highlight it, I want to talk about how it's widening inequality, it's further placing pressure on students who are already dealing with it. Those 2 weeks we're talking about where we bring the students back before they do their Leaving Cert, the vast bulk of those 2 weeks are going to be taken up by teachers dealing with mental health supports of students. They're going to be taken up by teachers sitting down with students, having students burst out of their classrooms and expressing the fact that they're not prepared for this. That happens every year. It's going to happen much further this year. I do want to touch on the digital divide and the announcements that were made in the last day, because I just want to figure it out, because there's some questions I have on that. The 7 million that was announced for secondary school students, I'm particularly fascinated with this for a couple of reasons. So that's 7 million for secondary schools to invest in digital technology. Can you just confirm, was that taken from the ICT budget that usually goes to top-ups from the department to award schools that had good digital strategies? And if so, that's not actually that's not an investment. And will that 7 million, if it is taken from that previous ICT budget that already exists, will that be available to the same extent next year or later on in the year? On the 7 million and what that actually looks like on the ground for schools, so I'm on the board of management of an inner city school with 160 students. That works out for my school of about €2,900 in total from the department. A similar school up the road that has 750 students, that works out at about €17,000 in total from the department. So 2,900 for my school of 160, 17,000 for the school with 750. That's fair enough. It's about €20 per student in the school. Or if the schools are to take the advice of the department and focus on the Leaving Cert students, it's about €120 per 6-year student for devices. There was a circular from the department that said schools are left to purchase and distribute their own devices themselves, which I'm sure will bring an added cost. And then the department also added in their memo yesterday that the schools can buy, the department will be suggesting that they buy a HP mini tower with a 4K monitor for €979 or a Dell laptop for €1,178. So I'll tell you what that means in terms of the school I'm on the board of. For that school of 160, they can buy 3 devices from that. The school of 750 can buy 17 devices. So in terms of my questions, how is this going to be effective? So we've talked about the digital void. How is that sum of money going to be effective in bridging that digital void when the need is far greater than the amount being allocated? I don't just want to come with problems, there's also solutions there. Has the department thought about collaborating with initiatives that are being proven to work? There's one really effective initiative happening at the moment, which I did bring to the attention of the department previously, which is the initiative that's happening between the ESB, Camera Education and the Trinity Access Partnership that have the capacity to deliver the voices directly to students on a national network and have source of voices at 1/5 of the price that the department is currently suggesting to schools in their memo yesterday. So perhaps the Minister could answer those two questions, particularly relating to Leaving Cert students. And also, given the level of inequality exists and the fact that international students are not going to be taking up their places, unfortunately, in schools, in universities this year, has the Minister considered widening the access programme places that exist in universities at the moment? And if there is a little bit of time, I might come back and talk about the junior cert, but the Minister can just touch on someone else's points. Thank you.
And Hannah, 4 minutes for the reply.
Okay, I know kind of that you've expanded on a couple of major points there, and especially the Leaving Cert. You possibly entered into where we need to go with the Leaving Cert in the future as well, in terms of the Leaving Cert review, and no doubt you'll be adding to that debate as the time moves forward. But one thing's for sure, the Leaving Cert as we know it, certainly going into the future, will be different, and it'll have to be different, because this debate is not about just Leaving Cert Class 2020. This is also about the Leaving Cert Class 2021. Those Leaving Certs are losing out on class time with their teacher today, this year, and also the uncertainty around starting times in September. How does it impact on them? So this idea of having a 2-year Leaving Cert course and everything goes to the finish line, down to the wire, this has certainly opened up the whole conversation around the Leaving Cert, and it has certainly opened up discussions in terms of having more continued assessment along the way. But unfortunately, we're not there. We're not at that particular juncture. And with all the, I suppose, the challenges of the days that we find ourselves in now, in terms of the Leaving Cert itself, we don't have a standardised system to lend itself to looking at different ways. But we do have a system that allows for objectivity and also for transparency and also for fairness in terms of the papers been done and been corrected on an anonymous basis. So there is that fairness central to the Leaving Cert. But look, you've raised a number of issues there, and I do take your point as well. I'm being contacted individually by many students. They're highlighting the stress, they're highlighting the difficulties that they're experiencing, and there's a big debate out there for predicted grades coming from young people themselves. But there's also the challenges inherent in that as well, in terms of ensuring that fairness is at the heart of it, in terms of what recourse has a student got after a predicted grade, and they're a few points short of a college place, which takes me on to your third element. I'll come back to the digital divide. You know, potentially there will be extra places available in the third level sector, because there may be and possibly will be less international students coming into the third level sector. But that question you raised, are we looking at more places? We're looking at everything. We're looking at absolutely every potential scenario. We're looking, and that's why we set up the Higher Education Authority, or the Higher Education Group within the department as well, to look at that transition to third level. The digital divide, look, when you make an announcement and it doesn't, cover everything, that is obviously always the challenge of politics. But to answer the question in relation to the 10 million, as you correctly pointed out, was money for the back end of the year and was to go to schools of school excellence. So I made the decision to look at that money, and rather than taking it all from primary, we've left 3 million for primary school, but that 7 million is to specifically go to targeted intervention. And I know your insight on a board of management, as well as your principal, will know exactly potentially where the gaps are and who needs the devices. A lot of our students, they have the smartphones, they have that capacity, but as one of the deputies raised tonight as well, there's a competition going on in households, parents working from home in terms of devices and uses of devices, but there is also, for GESH schools, there's extra funding to go. And we're also looking at bulk buying, we're also looking at the companies to see how we can get the extra devices, whether they're laptops, at a more reasonable.
Just in relation to specifically the fact that a school of 160 might have 3 devices in a DESH school, that doesn't seem like it'll be enough, does it? Like 3 devices in a school of 160 for the DESH school, where actually 90+% of the students will need a device, is just not enough.
Well, no, it doesn't appear to be enough, but out of the 160, how many Leaving Cert students?
There's 25.
So you have 25 Leaving Cert students, so you work on the basis that some students will have access to the technology, but obviously you could have unique situations there where maybe none of the students have. You'll have no details. Yeah. So maybe the best thing, Chairman, is for the Deputy maybe to send me on specific details of that school. I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you, Minister.